So, yes, thank you for very generously talking about me. My voice is going slightly, so I'm hoping that it lasts. When I was 6, I was thinking back to when I was 6. There was a significant. I want to talk about a few significant childhood kind of memories that have, I think, contributed. Well, maybe have they contributed? Anyway, they've somehow been part of what's led me to the Dharma. So I can remember Christmas when I was 6. So this is 1971. We didn't celebrate Christmas in my family particularly. I came from a Hindu background, but my parents, so that I wouldn't feel left out, there was always Father Christmas would leave something. And I can remember burning the week before, we had a coal fire, my requests. And I definitely knew what I wanted. And lo and behold, when I woke up on Christmas morning, on the sort of bedside cabinet, there was this parcel. It was about so big, I can remember it. And I was so excited, so excited. It's the only Christmas I remember from early childhood. And what I'd asked for was a magic set. Because I did think of myself as being a magician. I just lacked the tools. So now I was going to have the magic set, and I opened it, and it was a magic set. And I was so excited, and I got the wand out and immediately tried to turn my sister into a frog. I like my sister. She's older than me. She's a lovely woman. If she's watching, she might be watching. But at that age, that was the natural instinct, to turn your sister into a frog. And I wasn't able to. The transformation that I was hoping for, regardless of the spells that I knew, didn't work. And it gradually dawned on me over the course of the next hour or two that this magic set was really just a box of tricks. It came with some instruction manual, and you had to learn all these tricks, and I was so disappointed. It was like an early disillusionment, because I still believed in Father Christmas, but he hadn't delivered what I wanted. And I can remember we didn't have very much money, so I knew that my parents, this was a big, I didn't get loads of toys, so I tried to please them by pretending to be pleased with this thing and playing with it for a little while. Anyway, that's my first story. Later on, when I was probably about 8, a couple of years later, I guess, I had more success with magic. I invented a sort of religious deity called Yalsva, sort of an early attempt at Vajrasattva, I think. And I sort of divined shapes in the clouds, and it became a cloud deity, basically. And anyway, Yalza was the name. And at school, if it snowed, then we were allowed extra playtime at lunchtime and break time. So I was praying for snow to Yalza, which involved chanting Yalza, 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 Yalza. I somehow managed to get the whole class to chant Yalza under their breath. I don't know what the teacher thought was going on, but we were all... I remember it quite vividly, Yalza, Yalza, Yalza. And it snowed. So I was completely convinced that I had made it snow. My classmates were gobsmacked that I could control the weather. And I was slightly spooked. That maybe Yalza did exist. Maybe I was in touch with something. I was definitely searching for some magic, I guess, and meaning in the world. And that continued as I grew older. When I was 11, It was January the 13th, I was 11, and it was snowing actually, and I was playing with a friend, Darren, and I was late home from school because we were just playing in the snow. And that night, my dad started having chest pains, and then in the middle of the night, he died. He had a heart attack. He was only 45, never had any symptoms before. And so that was, of course, a life-changing, transformative experience. My childhood sort of stopped, or changed anyway. Stopped is too dramatic a word, but I think I started to feel like I had to grow up from that point. And but one of the things that this urge for magic continued, and by then I felt that there was something beyond death. Well, I was curious as to whether there was something beyond death or not. There was a sort of questioning, as kids do. And so I now thought, right, well, if there is something beyond death, then I'm going to talk to my father, and he surely would tell me if there was something beyond death. You know, he would communicate with me. So I had a pack of playing cards that belonged to him, and I would play with these cards, and I would cut them in various ways. Anyway, I invented my own sort of psychic game, asking him questions and asking for responses. And to my surprise, he responded time and time and time again. The cards would reveal, there would be a 5 of hearts for a yes, there would be a yes or no question, a 5 of hearts for a yes and an 8 of spades for a no. And time again, he responded consistently to my childish questions. I can't remember the questions, I can remember the responses. Anyway, various other sort of psychic phenomena happened that, to me at least, of course I can't prove it, I could have been bonkers, but to me it convinced me that there is something beyond death, that death is not the end of our personality, something continues. So from that point onwards, I was there was this yearning to work out, well, what is it that continues? Why? What does life mean? And what I couldn't understand after his death was something as traumatic, catastrophic as death had happened in my world, but the adults around me, including relatives of my father, carried on as if life had to go on. And, they carried on going to work and getting on with their normal things. I mean, I did too. But part of me couldn't take any of that seriously anymore. I couldn't formulate the question, but there was a certain sense of, surely there's got to be more to life than what my father did, which was work hard, go to work, save up. We bought a car, a fridge, a phone, a holiday. Was that it? And then you drop dead. And then how did these other people just carry on? And then also, if there was something after death, didn't that mean that life had some sort of meaning? If it continued, then I felt that there was a purpose that I didn't know about. There was a larger context that I didn't fully understand, but life in that larger context meant something different to if it all ended at death. Does that make sense? Yeah? Anyway, so I started reading as widely as I could, and eventually in my teens came across some Buddhist books and felt by the time I was about 17 that I was a Buddhist, but I had no idea what Buddhism was, really. No idea. And it became a bit of a, something to impress people at parties with. I don't know if you do that with Buddhism. Because I was a really interesting one, but knew all about Zen. And I didn't know a thing. I actually tried practicing Zen Buddhism when I was at university. There was a Buddhist group in the town, and I didn't learn anything. But one thing, I mean, that's not their fault necessarily, but one thing, actually I came away disillusioned, but one thing that I they tried to get me to do was to discipline myself and learn mindfulness. And they failed, actually, and I'm so undisciplined today. So, for example, they asked that we should go to bed at the same time every day, not varying it by a minute, yeah? And get up at the same time every morning, not varying it by a minute. And then your egotism, one's ego, would react to that, resist, and then that was good, because you had to not give in to you had to sort of wear down the egotism. I was hopeless at it. I can remember being in a pub with my housemates, and Tim turned to me and said, "Shouldn't you be in bed?" And I still had my pint almost full, and so you couldn't waste your drink. So I was downing my beer as quickly as I could to hop onto my bike, to cycle the 10 minutes home, to jump into bed so that I was only a few minutes late, like a good Buddhist. So anyway, I sort of looked back at my childhood with some... I'm glad that I was questing. I didn't find any answers, really, but I was glad that I was questing. And it wasn't until my 20s, really, late 20s, that I came across this Buddhist movement and found a home, really, or at least I met people who may not have had the answers, but who were also questing. And I so wanted that. I so wanted that. By that time, I was working in the corporate world in IT, surrounded by very impressive, intelligent people who weren't questing, for whom it was enough to get the next pay grade and the upgrade to their car or whatever it was. And inside, I felt I was dying, while also being on this career ladder towards whatever. So anyway, so glad to meet some people that I could... They were questioning what life was. And Buddhism, I think, is so much more about the questioning than the answering. The Buddha himself didn't give pat answers. He just said, try this, and it will lead you to greater fulfillment and freedom. And it's very pragmatic in a certain sense. I can remember being on a 5 Buddha Mandala retreat, one of probably my third retreat. So I was over the moon at having found the Dharma. And I went to a retreat centre where it's in Wales called Vajrasattva, and it's an intensive meditation retreat. There was a lot of silence, a lot more than here. And each of these figures, as they were unfolded before me, we created a sort of circular shrine in the centre of the room with each of the quadrants. You know, each day would be filled with one of these figures and colours, and I felt ecstatic, not all the time, but some of the time. I felt like I would go out and find offerings of the colour of the Buddhas so that I could offer them. Anyway, on that retreat, when we got to Varochana, I kind of thought, is that it? So I really responded to them, and then I thought, that's not enough. Somehow that's not enough. Each of them was wonderful as a portal into the enlightened mind, and I knew that they were symbols, not literal truths. But somehow symbolically it didn't feel enough. And then I came across, while I was there, I was reading a book called Meeting the Buddhas by an order member called Vastness, and I opened it fairly randomly, and it was on this page. The figure of Vajrasattva was there. And what he said was that Vajrasattva was the sixth Buddha. The sixth Buddha. So there's a 5 Buddha mandala, which is commonly sort of worshipped in Mahayana Buddhism. But then there's a 6th that the Tantra adds, a 6th Buddha. And this 6th Buddha really intrigued me, because what Vastness said was that he brings together all of the other 5. He's the embodiment of all of the other 5, and he takes it to another dimension. So if you imagine the mandala as a horizontal circle with each of the Buddhas, Akshobhya here, Amitabha there, Ratnasambhava to my left, and Namodasiddhi to my right, and Varochana in the middle, then Vajrasattva is above them. He's above them. He's the Buddha's Buddha. He's the Buddha that the other Buddhas worship. So or at least that's one way of thinking about it. He's the first Buddha, as it were, the first form. He's absolute reality personified. If you had to personify the absolute truth, which is beyond words and concepts, it would be Vajrasattva. He is, as Suragupta was saying, beyond time and space, and yet he reaches down in time and space through love, through compassion. So I was intrigued by Vajrasattva, and when I was ordained, you're given a particular meditation practice, if you want one, a figure to contemplate, to meditate upon, to visualize. It becomes not just a practice, but if you let it, these figures can become a symbol for the myth of your life, a symbol for everything that your life is meant to be, orientating towards, an ideal for you. And I asked the preceptor who was ordaining me, my preceptor, a man called Subhuti, I asked him for this practice, the Vajrasattva practice. And he said, oh yes, that's absolutely right. And he wouldn't quite explain why, but it was so affirming to have that, because I wasn't completely sure. And I said to him, yeah, but I'm not sure about Vajrasattva in all respects. And he said, what are you not sure about? And I said, I don't like the fact that he's associated with purity. And he is. He's associated, one of his associations, a big association, is purity. And I'm going to come on to what that means. And Subhuti, my preceptor, turned to me and said, he's nothing to do with purity. Which was exactly the right thing to say, because all the textbooks tell you Vajrasattva is, one of his qualities is that he purifies, he is absolute purity. So I want to explore that a little bit. But first of all, I just want to turn to the figure and say a little bit about his appearance. And we have to remember the appearance is just a symbol, a doorway, a portal, so that we can connect to a reality that is beyond form. So he's white, like the unrefracted light, the light that contains all the other colours. He's white, but he's dazzling white. He's a white so brilliant, a bit like Varochana. He's a white so brilliant that you can't really look at it. It's said to be like sunlight on snow, sunlight dazzling on snow, glittering white on snow. He comes from the Tibetan tradition, the Vajrayana, the Tantra. So there would have been this pristine, in Tibet you probably get incredibly blue skies and incredibly vivid colours and dazzling snow mountains. Anyway, he's dazzling white. He's so white in a way that in order to approach him, you can't look at him directly, just as you can't in ordinary circumstances look at the sun. But fortunately, he's clothed in rainbows. He's surrounded in rainbows that allow you to gaze at him. So that's I find very beautiful. He holds in his hands, so in his right hand, he's holding a Vajra. Earlier in the retreat, we heard about a Vajra. We heard Kshantikara talking about a double Vajra. A Vajra is it's another symbol for absolute reality. It's the energy of absolute reality. A bit like Zeus's thunderbolt would be. It's full of energy, it's condensed energy. But in Vajrasattva's case, it symbolizes his compassion. So though he's a wisdom figure, actually he's also a compassion figure. In him, wisdom and compassion are completely unified. So he holds to his heart this Vajra, which helps him communicate and reach down into time and space and the ordinary world, and wake people up to the truth. In his left hand, he holds a bell, a silver bell. So it's a golden Vajra and a silver bell. And the silver bell is, in his case, a symbol for wisdom. It's wisdom that you have to listen to, you have to be receptive to, and it won't be conceptual. You hear the bell and you get it or you don't. You wake up or you don't. Anyway, it's beyond concepts. He holds the bell of wisdom and the Vajra of compassion. He's adorned with jewels, and he wears a crown, and on his crown are the other 5 Buddhas, sometimes depicted as jewels. But let me come back to purity. So purity in Vajrasattva, purity for me, when I took on the practice, didn't have very positive connotations. I think, in our Western Christian world, in Christianity, purity is so much associated with meekness and, in my mind it was, and with virginity. It seems, purity is always about sex and whether you've had some or not. And, and that, I was a young man and I didn't want to just be pure in that sense, not virginal certainly. And purity in the Hindu context, Hindus take purity very literally, and it's all about washing and bathing, and the caste system, the sheer cruelty and inhumanity of the caste system can be based on purity, so that you don't pollute each other with, higher castes aren't polluted by the lower castes, etc. So purity just had no real positive connotations for me. Now, actually, what Vajrasattva's purity is about is something different. There is something about the law of karma that is very, very important for all of us as practitioners. Unless we learn to purify our mind with more and more skillful intentions of metta and awareness, then the clouds remain over that blue sky and over that sun. We cloud our mind habitually. It's a very, very deep instinct to have clouds in our mind. Even on a good day where I feel really happy, from a Buddha's perspective, we're still under cloud. We're still under cloud. It's just that the cloud might not be as dark as it is when we're feeling unhappy. We're still clouded. And purification is about parting the clouds to reveal the radiance behind. And if Varochana is the sun, the radiance of the sun, then Vajrasattva is the blue sky containing the sun and containing everything in this phenomenal world. He's the blue sky, which is pristine, clear, and radiant. But we don't see that ordinarily because of the clouds. I was thinking, not only do we have clouds, but very often in our lives it's raining. Yeah, so the clouds are sort of pouring down. And ethics in Buddhism feels to me about at least stopping the rain. Yeah, at least stopping the rain. Acting more skillfully will over time, maybe not in the 5-10 days that you've been here, but over time it will, and I know from my own experience, cause more clement weather in our lives. It will stop raining so hard. It's not that everything will always be rosy, of course not, but we won't add to our own pain. So yes, you could think of it as stopping raining. Then meditation, you could say, is like thinning the clouds. It's about, and maybe lightening them so they're not so dark. So they become a bit softer and fluffier and maybe thinner, a little bit more transparent, a little bit more permeable to the light. So that's what we do when we meditate. And then, of course, wisdom is about parting the clouds. Wisdom is about sort of renting a hole in the veil of the clouds that keep us ignorant, and something of the sky comes through. Something. You only have to catch the blue sky for a moment, a glimpse of it, and like wisdom you only have to have a flash of wisdom, insight in this case, or prajna as it's called, and you'll never lose faith again that there is a blue sky. It's until that point we haven't seen that there is something vast and beautiful, sublime even, beyond our ordinary experience, because we're hidden under cloud. And then if you get a glimpse of what's beautiful and vast, you can never forget it. The clouds do cover over again until enlightenment. There will always be clouds, full and perfect enlightenment. But you start getting glimpses of the sky as you practice. So the purity of Vajrasattva isn't just about ethical purity, moral purity, which stops the rain. It's also the purity of the blue sky behind all the clouds. It's a purity that is... the sky, in this case, stands for our intrinsic nature of mind. It stands for the deepest level of consciousness that we're capable of. The highest level, perhaps, deepest and highest are metaphors. It stands for our birthright. But ordinarily, we don't exist at that level of consciousness because of our egotism and our ignorance. So our self-centeredness, our wanting to be, even our wanting to be happy, we can go about it in such egotistical ways. It's a natural thing to want to be happy. It's not wrong, but the egotism around it keeps us small, keeps us cloud-covered, yeah? And also our ignorance. And by ignorance, I mean our spiritual ignorance, which doesn't quite believe that there is a sky beyond the clouds. So I'm going to try and explore more about what this nature of mind is. It's a way of talking, it's a metaphor, and everything I say, particularly from now on in the talk, is metaphor. And if you take it literally, you take it at your peril, because Buddhism doesn't literalize. So for example, it says one of the ways that you can go wrong is by conceiving of a deity as a creator god, as a literal deity, a literal creator god. And as soon as you do that, there are all sorts of potential pitfalls that one can go wrong down. I'm not saying it's all bad, but you look at the legacy of many theistic traditions, and it's not all good either. Yeah, there are all sorts of potential pitfalls of having a creator god. Buddhism says, no, don't go down that road. But then the other road that is very, very tempting to go down, and particularly perhaps for us in the modern West, is the road that says there's no thing beyond this life. Death is the end. My ordinary mind is all there is. This ordinary phenomenal world is real and solid, just as it appears to be. That's all there is. That's a nihilistic, materialist perspective. And the Buddha taught that as not only wrong, but ugly. He said that eternalism was wrong, nihilism was wrong and also ugly. It's very wrong. Yeah, it's very wrong. And of course, it's very easy to ricochet between the two, to go from feeling there's nothing to, there's a literal creator, or Vajrasattva's a literal being. Does that make sense? We're trying to tread a very, very fine line, and it's a line that's so fine that it's very difficult to talk about what actually it's saying. The Buddha, for example, didn't say very much about the nature of reality. He didn't say very much about enlightenment. He just tended to focus on how to get there. He said, you'll find out. And he didn't say very much. Later Buddhism developed all sorts of philosophy and images of what enlightenment is. And I think I need some of those teachings, both sort of conceptual teachings and images, because I come from a very nihilistic culture, and it's so easy to think that there's nothing beyond the clouds. What's the point if it's all going to end in death? Now, I was fortunate from an early age, I didn't believe that it did end in death, and I'm hoping that you have some intimation. Well, I can't communicate. I can't convince you if you do think it all ends in death. All I'm trying to say is that the Buddha said that there was more. There was more. And that life as we live it isn't living from our potential. We can be much, much more. Much, much more. And hopefully this retreat's given you a bit of a glimpse that, yes, you can be a bit more. Yeah? Even though you might not have reached enlightenment. I mean, there's a day to go. But even if you... so do stay with it. But even though you might not have reached it yet, I'm hoping that you can sense that this retreat has an effect, practicing, and we're not doing anything particularly special, we're just practicing the Buddha's teachings in a very ordinary way. Some meditation, some more awareness, kindness, community, friendship, love. And already, well, I can see in you, even if you can't see in yourself, transformation happening. Vajrasattva is said to be not in time and space. The blue sky that he personifies isn't in time and space. This phenomenal world of time and space and matter and form and me and you is, Buddhism says it's mirage-like, and there's, as it were, a reality beyond it, an absolute reality beyond it, but not a God, not a creator God. The blue sky that Vajrasattva represents, isn't in time and space. And consciousness, or at least part of, because he represents the deepest dimension of our consciousness. So the deepest dimension of our consciousness isn't in time and space. Now, I don't know quite what that means. I don't know how to communicate it. But one way that I was thinking of is that it's a different perspective altogether on our experience. The fact that Vajrasattva is above the mandala of the other Buddhas means that he's in a different dimension to the other Buddhas. And imagine if we were creatures on a flat land, we were just two-dimensional creatures that didn't have a third dimension, that we didn't know what up was. So we could only look horizontally, yeah? Imagine if somebody said to you, no, there's an up. There is up. Look, up. And you'd say, what do you mean up? Don't talk gibberish. There's only flat, along, horizontal. Well, it's a bit like that. Vajrasattva is in a different dimension, and we need to learn to look up into that dimension. So I was thinking, well, how do you do that? Well, one way of doing that is to perhaps see if we can broaden our perspective on time and space. See if we can just kind of have a sense of vast space and vast time. At least that's a bit bigger than just thinking that the space that I occupy and the moment, like today or now, is all that's going on. You know how on a retreat we can get very, very caught up in our current experience because we're asking ourselves to look at our experience. We do need to do that. But Buddhism says we also need to learn to hold our experience in the biggest possible perspective that we can, in the biggest possible container that we can. Otherwise, do you see how Buddhism could lead us to being self-obsessed? Yeah? My meditation went well at 5 o'clock and it didn't at 4 o'clock, and it was great at 3 o'clock yesterday, and we can lose the bigger context. You know, there is a world out there beyond this retreat even. Yeah. So I was turning to Carl Sagan, he's no longer alive, but the astronomer. He was also a sort of poet, and he was the scientist that inspired me when I was little. I went on to study physics, by the way, because I wanted to understand time and space. I wanted to understand what matter was. And I didn't, in the end, understand. Not just because I wasn't very good at I wasn't very good at physics, but it wasn't just because I wasn't very good at it, but I realized that nobody really understands. Physicists have theories, and even those theories, they're not complete, and they know they're not complete, they're not completely right. What I did come away with from studying physics was a very, very firm sort of conviction that common sense reality isn't truth, that our senses don't reveal the truth, and neither does ordinary reason reveal the truth, that reality, even from a physicist's perspective, is beyond our conceptual grasp. Yeah? So physicists have lots of theories, they're all written in the language of mathematics, and none of them can agree what the maths means in conceptual terms. Anyway, vast space. So Carl Sagan, do you remember when Voyager 1, you're probably too young, some of you. Anyway, Voyager 1 was a space probe that was sent off sometime, and it sort of photographed various planets in the solar system, and then it's still out there. It went beyond the solar system, and it's now in interstellar space. And Carl Sagan got them to program Voyager 1, I think it was Voyager 1, to, when it was on the furthest edge of the solar system, to turn around and take a picture of the Earth from the edge of the solar system. And that picture, of course, is the famous pale blue dot picture, where you see vast blackness, and then, due to actually a trick of the lens and a trick of the light, you get this sunbeam, this ray of sunlight through the blackness, and then in the sunbeam there's a pale blue dot, tiny, tiny dot, which is us. And this is what Carl Sagan had to say. So this is a sense at getting a sense of the vastness of space before we try and go beyond space altogether. Yeah? Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Isn't that beautiful? So I wanted to read that out just as a reminder to broaden our minds. There's more, and it's infinitely vast. There's so much more. That doesn't mean, by the way, that we're insignificant, that what happens to us is insignificant. It's very easy to think, therefore, we don't matter. No, Buddhism says everything is significant. Einstein once said there are two ways to live one's life, as though nothing is a miracle or as everything is a miracle. And Buddhism would say everything is a miracle. Everything, yeah? Including what's happening to you and me and what happens to the moon. Everything, yeah, is a miracle. The fact that we had pastries this morning is a minor miracle in my book. So yes, Buddhism says, no, we must appreciate every moment and every experience for its beauty, its wonder, but also have a context of the vastness of everything. Then vast time. So let me just tell you what Carl Sagan said about vast time. What he did was he imagined that the universe has been going for about 14 billion years, give or take, and he imagined that was compressed into a year. So he then had a cosmic calendar. He says the cosmic calendar compresses the local history of the universe into a single year. If the universe began on January the 1st, it was not until May that the Milky Way formed. Other planetary systems may have appeared in June, July, and August, but our Sun and Earth not until mid-September. Life arose soon after. We humans appear on the cosmic calendar so recently that our recorded history occupies only the last few seconds of the last minute of December the 31st. Isn't that amazing? So tomorrow on New Year's Eve, just remember how recent we are, and that feels miraculous as well. I don't know why, but it just does. Another perspective that I find helpful, you may or may not find helpful, in giving me a sense of context is, well, as I've already mentioned, a perspective that contemplates death. So when my father died, it opened my questing up to questioning. Questing's too grand a word. It opened it up to wanting, it opened the context up. What was life about? Vajrasattva is also associated with death. On the shrine here, you'll see a skull. Come and have a look at the skull. That's a real human skull. That's real. The Tibetan Buddhism particularly, the Tantra says, let's contemplate death, not because we want to depress ourselves with it, not because we want to get depressed. And if you feel yourself getting depressed, then don't look at it. Yeah, there's plenty of other nice shiny things to look at on the shrine. But because contemplating death can make life feel more miraculous and make life feel more precious. And none of us knows how long we've got. And if we could live with the knowledge that we don't know how long we've got, but there's something beautiful about life, then as well as something painful often and tragic, if we could live with that, we might have a bigger context as to what we do with our life and our time. Yeah? So the death perspective. I'm reading War and Peace at the moment, and one of the characters, I was going to tell you which one, but you might want to read it, or you might not have read it, so I won't tell you. Anyway, he's dying. In fact, he's dead. Yeah, in fact, he's dead. I'm about 1,000 pages in, and he's dead. Which is a shame, because he was a lovely character. So I won't tell you who. Anyway, as he's lying on his deathbed, he's been in war, he's been in love, he's young, if I say any more, it'll give him away. Anyway, he's been full of passion in his life. He's had a good life in some way. He's very much in love. He dies quite slowly of a wound. And as he's dying, as he's lying there, the last few days, it's like he lets go of all the clinging that he had to his life, even to his love. So this is a radical thing that Tolstoy's pointing to. He lets go of life itself, but not in a nihilistic way. What he then experiences is a radiant, beautiful love for all life. For all life. He dies ecstatic, at peace, and with such joy. But as he's lying there, he's thinking, I can't communicate this. There's all these loved ones around him weeping, and he's inwardly thinking, no, this is great. And he's thinking, I can't communicate it, they won't understand. And he's weak anyway, so he can't talk very much. Tolstoy knew something of wisdom. He knew something of wisdom. Now, in Buddhism, what we're trying to do is not wait until the moment of physical death before we release that love, that freedom. We release it from the shackles of egotism. We're not going to wait till the moment of death, because at the moment of death we might not be able to do it. My father wasn't able to do it. As far as I could see, he died in agony, and he died with regrets. He died, I can remember holding his hand on his deathbed, and he was in a lot of pain, and he said, he held my hand, and he said, he was just feeling remorse at not having been a kinder man. He said, "Oh, I've hurt people, I've been difficult, and I've been angry. I don't want to die like that." And you don't have to die like that. My mother died a few years ago, and she died beautifully. She died beautifully, and I don't think... She died beautifully, but also there was a lot of love in her life. I mean, she was a very, very kind woman. Everybody loved her, and she seemed to just radiate warmth. And it's not a coincidence that she had been meditating for the last 30 years of her life, 34 years of her life, I think. I think practice does something. Yeah, you can die well, but also you don't have to wait till the moment of death. You can live well with this life. Okay, I'm going to have to move on. So I want to just try and touch on what it might be like to go beyond time and space. What Vajrasattva truly represents, the blue sky that he represents, symbolises. This phenomenal world, Buddhism says it's mirage-like, it's dream-like. It's not that it's not happening, but it's not absolutely as real and solid and objective as we normally take for granted. I wanted to just tell you a little image from a retreat, my long solitary retreat last year. So I'd been meditating on my own for about 5 months or so. I was coming to the end of my retreat. I was going on slightly longer walks, and I was about 1,000 meters up in a retreat centre that we've got in southern Spain that Yeshadeva helped to found. And there's a place that you can go where there's a sheer cliff. It's called World's End because it looks like World's End. I mean, obviously, it isn't. We call it World's End. Anyway, it's a sheer drop. There's rocks. It's wonderful. And you can see for miles. In the distance, you can see the sea. So I just went for a walk to World's End. And it was quite a sunny day. But when I got to World's End, you couldn't see a thing. There was just this wall of cloud, just a vertical wall of cloud. So I wasn't in cloud. There was just this wall of cloud beyond the cliff. And that was quite sort of mysterious, just like the mist this morning. But then I saw a figure in it, and I thought, oh my God, there's a figure. I've been meditating, and it was a rainbowed figure. It was a standing figure, surrounded by rainbows. And I had to blink, because I thought, when you've been on your own that long, and you've been meditating, you kind of start to think, am I seeing things? And then it moved, this rainbow figure. It seemed to come towards me. So it was a figure. And I thought, I've been visualizing these figures, and now they're real. They're appearing. And then I saw it move again, and I realized that it moved as I moved. If I raised my hand, it raised its hand and sort of waved back. And it was a sort of optical phenomenon called a Brocken spectre. And I won't explain the science behind it. There is a science behind it. The sun was behind me, the clouds were in front. It cast a rainbow shadow of myself onto the cloud bank. I was looking at myself and worshipping myself, which is not that unusual. So, but there it was. For as long as it lasted, it was a source of wonder. Actually, it still was. It was a source of wonder. Rainbows are strange. Twisla was talking about them. They're not completely objective, but they're not completely subjective. They're not completely objective because you can't really touch them. They don't have any substance to them. They're a phenomena that's arisen partly because of the conditions of the rain and the sun and the light and the refraction, partly because of our optical nervous system, what we can see, and the mind, our consciousness. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, it's a phenomenon that's neither completely subjective nor completely objective. Anyway, there you go, a Brockensprecher appeared. What Buddhism says is that everything in this phenomenal world is like that. We think it's really solid and out there, just as we perceive it, but actually perception is a wonderful faculty that creates all sorts of illusions. Even the perception of colour. Is colour out there, in here? Where's it happening? The experience of colour is neither completely objective nor completely subjective. It's an experience. We don't really know what's out there independent of our experience. This phenomenal world is miraculous, but it's also rainbow-like. It's not substantial. This is what Buddhism's saying. It's not completely real, and yet it's happening, and we're part of it, and it's beautiful if you don't cling to it. As soon as you try and say, I'm going to worship the Brockensprecher, or I want to hold him, or whatever, as soon as you cling, it doesn't work. It just causes pain. So ultimate reality, absolute reality, is somehow seeing the rainbow-like nature of this phenomenal world. It's said that if we could see this phenomenal world for what it is truly, it's like we would step outside of it somehow. We wouldn't be caught up in it. And what we'd step outside into is a vast blue sky that is pristine, always pure, can never be sullied, was never harmed in any way. Our true nature is always of the nature of light and love and peace and serenity and connection. It's only our misinterpretation of this phenomenal world that obscures that from us. So Vajrasattva is our true nature. So lastly, I want to move on. I'm starting to come to the end. All of that, in a way, is symbolized by Vajrasattva's bell, the wisdom that he holds in his left hand. But he doesn't remain in this blue sky outside of time and space. The phenomenal thing is, the incredible thing is, that the enlightened mind, when it's freed from the bonds of this phenomenal existence, it chooses to step back into time, into space, in order to awaken other beings, in order to help us wake up. It engages with this world while at the same time somehow being above and outside this world. It engages with love. Without love, it's not wisdom. Without love, it's escapism. It's fantasy. And that's so important. Without engagement, we can delude ourselves that we're somehow in this blue sky beyond time and space. The truth of that, if we are, will manifest in our relationships with each other. Without generosity, empathy, love, kindness, and a desire for all beings to wake up to their true potential. Without that, it's not wisdom. But conversely, compassion as it's called, this Vajra, conversely, it needs wisdom too. Because without the wisdom, our love tends to attachment, romantic attachment or sentimentality or clinging in some way. It's very, very difficult to just be open-hearted and pure in our love without wanting something back. Yeah, there's so often a bargaining. So wisdom and compassion are two sides that have to go together. They're inseparable. In Vajrasattva, they're inseparable. Buddhism isn't about escapism. It's about learning to renounce this world, attachment at least to this world, learning to die to our world, to our experience, to let go in the deepest, most radical way possible, so that we can re-engage in this world with love, so that we can collectively be a force for good in the world. And it seems to me that that's what the world needs more than anything. It needs people who are collectively, and I think collective is important because we can do so much more collectively as a community. It needs people who are exemplifying both the withdrawing from attachment, but also re-engaging with love together. And it needs people who are exemplifying, questioning what life is, what the real purpose of life is. Even if I never really, I don't know how close I'll get to the goal of enlightenment in this lifetime. But what I do know is that the years of practice have given my life fulfillment and meaning beyond anything that I'd ever dreamed of or wished for. When I was wishing as a 6-year-old for that magic set, I didn't realize that one day I'd actually receive it. And it's more amazing, more wonderful, more beautiful than I could have possibly imagined. And I hope that, I just hope that you'll get a glimpse of that. If you engage on retreat like you have been, if you keep at it, believe in it, it will reveal something of wonder, of magic, of meaning, of truth. And if you've already glimpsed that, then I was saying last night, carry on, because it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to leave this retreat and it to vanish like a dream. 2 weeks from now, it'll feel like, was I ever there? So do what you can to keep remembering, keep reminding yourself. The best way of doing that is to keep in touch, to keep practicing, but also find ways of keeping in touch with other people who are practicing. It's too precious an opportunity to squander. Don't leave it till chance on your deathbed as to whether you die with a sense of glory and wonder, or whether you leave this world with regret and pain and a sense of lost opportunity. I'll leave it there. Thank you.